Thank you for coming and joining us. We're going to talk a little bit about big data, and then we'll go listen to a big concert. So that'll be fun. Hopefully I can keep your attention before we get to that point. This slide was a little bit of a surprise to me. It sort of, hopefully it won't throw me off my game at the beginning. In my spare time, I manage the marketing for a grass-fed beef farm down in southeastern Massachusetts. So that's a little bit about me. And then we have the session. You can rate the session when I'm done. So I want to start. I want to back up here, give you a little surprise there. But I want to start this session with a question for you guys. How many of you guys feel like you have the skills, the knowledge to take advantage of all of the data that you have at your fingertips? Okay, there's one person. Show me where I run off track. Most people don't have this sense, and I think this is a problem because you guys are all HubSpot customers. You could be HubSpot customers, and you actually have most of the tools to take advantage of a ton of data. And what I want to do today is give you a sense of the process that you need to take advantage of all of that data. So I want to start this conversation with an example, a little story from Target. And I want to use Target because a lot of people think of Target as kind of Target and other big companies as kind of the paragon of data-driven marketing. And so the story is of a father who went into a Target and he went and found the manager, and he got angry with the manager because the manager of this, he said to the manager of this Target that he had been marketing, and Target in general had been marketing to his teenage daughter, specifically products that were targeted at pregnant women. So Target was targeting his daughter with products like onesies and diapers and baby wipes and stuff like that. And this guy was like, this is not reasonable. You shouldn't be targeting my teenage daughter with products for pregnant women. And so the manager of the Target said, I'm very, very sorry. There must have been a mistake. We will stop. And that was the end of the story. But it wasn't the end of the story, because a week later, the father, he went back into the Target, and he said, I'm very sorry, there's been a mistake here. My daughter was pregnant. You were right. So let me just make sure we're all clear about this. What happened was that Target figured out that this guy's daughter was pregnant before he did. Now, let's just get this out on the table that that's a little creepy. And there's some serious questions of privacy that marketers need to answer and be clear about. But putting those questions aside, and assuming we have answered them and we're getting people's permission to market to them, which I think is core to the process that I'm going to talk about here today. This is a really interesting marketing story because Target has figured out that this woman is pregnant and has targeted them with an offer that is actually very lucrative to Target. And when I say very lucrative, I'll read what Andrew Poole, who is the data scientist who ran this marketing program targeting pregnant women, had to say about it. He said that we knew that if we could identify them, and them meaning pregnant women, in their second trimester, there's a good chance we could capture them for years. As soon as we had them buying diapers from us, they're going to start buying everything else too. So Target found that by analyzing all of the data that they had from all of their stores and targeting people with specific offers for pregnant women, they had a fantastic return on their investment. This drove customers further down their funnel. And it's a fantastic example of the power of big data to drive revenue improvement for businesses. And so if you step back from this for a second, you can see that in general, for these big companies, big data has an opportunity to generate a lot of things that we care about in medium-sized companies. Big lead growth, big conversion rate growth, and big revenue growth. So this is the opportunity. Now, before we get a little too far down the path here, I just want to be clear on what we're talking about when we say big data. And if you ask a lot of people and you look at what a lot of people, the way most people define it, it's as a data set that is too large to be dealt with traditional tools. And for that reason, it's mostly big enterprises like Target and Amazon and Google and Netflix that have been taking advantage of this kind of opportunity. And for the rest of us, it's kind of like this. We have sort of a big data envy when we see opportunities and stories like Target's story. And what I mean by big data envy is it's kind of like when you go into a restaurant, maybe you cook, you know how to make chocolate cake, but you go to some fancy restaurant down here in the south end of Boston, and you get this piece of chocolate cake that is amazing. And your chocolate cake is over here, and you just don't see the steps that you need to take to get from the kind of chocolate cake that you created to the one that they create in the restaurant. And I think that for a lot of us marketers who are mere mortals, we don't work on the data science team at Target, this is how we feel about big data. It's like, okay, I see that that's an awesome story at Target, but like, what are the steps to get there? How do you actually do something like that? And so what I want to talk about today is that even though it's easy to get big data envy, it's actually not that hard to get good at using big data given all of the tools that are out there today. And I want to talk to you about that and sort of walk you through that process. And so what is this process? And how do you do this? I think you need to just forget about the sort of slick stories, that fancy chocolate cake, and start with the chocolate cake and the joy of cooking. Start with the basics. Start with the process. And so what I'm going to walk through here are 5 different steps and 5 different sort of steps to this process, 5 different chapters of this big data cookbook. Sound good? OK, cool. So before we get to that, I want to talk about sort of the fundamental changes that underlie all of this and that have enabled this huge growth in data and some of these new tools to become more prevalent. And so the biggest change, I think, is just the volume of data. So according to IBM scientists, there were 5 billion gigabytes of data created from the beginning of time to 2003. Now, I don't really know what a gigabyte is, and I don't have any way of relating to that or understanding the scale of that. But I can tell you that it's a lot smaller than the 10 billion gigabytes of data that will be created in the course of the 4 days of this conference. So in the past 9 years, we've gone from 5 billion gigabytes to data in all of time to 10 billion gigabytes of data in the course of the 4 days that we're here in this conference. So there's this huge explosion of data. And you can see this all around you. I mean, there's probably data being collected by the light fixtures here. There's data being collected by all your iPads and your iPhones. And every time you turn on your car, your TV, there's data just everywhere. And that's where this 10 billion gigabytes over the next 4 days comes from. There's just a huge volume of data being collected everywhere. So what does this mean for marketers? How does this change the way we market? Well, if you go back to last generation's marketing playbook, the Ogilvy marketing playbook, now these guys use data. David Ogilvy used data a lot. But when he used data, he went out and did a survey of Midwestern housewives and said, and when he got the data back, he said, OK, I'm going to target housewives in the Midwest between 30 and 40 with a blue advertisement, not a green one. And so he used a lot of data to make a small number of general decisions that applied to a broad swath of people. Today, it's very different. So Amazon markets in a very, very different way. They don't make general decisions. They make very specific decisions. So every time you go to Amazon, they're pulling data referencing analysis that they've done on all of their transactions, all of your transactions, and using that to make a specific decision on what to display on their pages for you that day. So because we have all of this new data, we're marketing with a whole bunch of specific decisions instead of a small number of general decisions. And the good news is that this is great for everybody. It's a classic happy economic story, because buyers are better off because they're now getting what they want. Instead of going and having to pick between the 5 lousy books that are at the bookstore, you can buy the book you want. Marketers are better off because they get to sell more books. So everybody wins. By creating this personalized, targeted market, all boats rise. Now, of course, this is a fantastic story for Amazon and for Target and Netflix, but what about mere mortals? I think there are a bunch of examples of mere mortals using this and fantastic marketers at medium-sized companies doing this. And I think the surprising thing is that a lot of you in this room are doing it right now, and you're just not thinking of it in terms of the process. I mean, there are a lot of HubSpot customers that are doing this as well. And this is one example of one. This is Scott Johnson, who's a marketing specialist at Tufts Medical. And that's a healthcare company here in the Boston area. And so Tufts and Scott have seen enormous growth in traffic over the time that they've been using HubSpot. And a lot of that is because they got started doing this sort of classic inbound marketing playbook: blogging, social media, SEO. Now, the thing that I thought was really interesting about Scott's story is that they took another step. They not only just started publishing content, optimizing it for the search engines and social, but they went and took a real analytical approach to the content that they were creating. They went and said, OK, I published this blog article, but what kind of links is it generating? What kind of social media traffic is it generating? What kind of conversion rates is it producing? And so it wasn't just a producing content. It was a producing content and measuring it towards specific goals. It's a subtle step, but it's a step that's very important to get to this kind of marketing that we're talking about with these big companies. Here's another example from a HubSpot customer. This is Deirdre Kurser, who is the VP of Sales and Marketing at a manufacturing company in Wisconsin. They do nameplates. And it's a very similar story. They started using HubSpot, started doing a lot more blogging, social media, SEO, generated a lot more traffic. But the thing that I thought was interesting here was that when they're collecting leads, they then used the data that they had gathered about the leads to segment them, to start sending them different messages, to start saying, OK, this lead converted on this page, so we're going to send them this ebook and send them to this salesperson. This lead converted over here, so we're not even going to bother sending them an ebook. We're going to call them up right away. And they segmented their lead based upon the information that they had gathered. Now it seems like a pretty simple step, but if you think about it, that's not too far off. It's several layers of complexity but it's the same basic process that Target was using. It's just segmenting your customers or your leads, and then sharing relevant content, relevant offers that engage them. So I wanted to dive into sort of how you do this. What is the process? The first thing to think about is that this is the data that you're working with. The average HubSpot customer has 21,000 actions or activities on their website every week. So there are 21,000 things happening on your site every week. And your job as an analytical marketer is to say, OK, how can I use these 21,000 activities to improve my funnel, to create content that attracts more visitors, to convert more visitors to leads, and to sell more of my product to those leads? You have all of this data to optimize that funnel. And the trick is just to use it the right way. Now, the problem is that a lot of people don't use it the right way. They don't have the right tools. They don't have the right process in place. And it's a lot like a cook somebody starts out learning to cook and they go buy a sous vide machine. I don't even know what something like that looks like, but people start off with fancy tools and they're like, it's not working for me. Well, it's not working for you because you started off with a stupid tool that's too expensive. There are tons of stories of marketers who get bogged down by these short-term tactics and narrow focus on specific tools. It doesn't work. You need to have a process in place. So here's one example of that kind of failure. This is a company that posted an article that documented this, and they went out and bought a fancy marketing automation platform. They did it before they had a process in place. They did it before they were creating enough content to share in the offers. They did it before they had a team in place to manage these offers. They did it before they were ready for it. And the company ended up actually shutting down. I think there were a number of reasons that it ended up shutting down, but this was part of the problem. There are a whole bunch of kind of data danger areas that you can run into by this narrow focus on specific tools and getting stuck on short-term tactics. One of the ones that we see a lot is arbitrary lead scoring. So everybody's infatuated with lead scoring, but rarely is there science behind it. Rarely do people have an analytical look at it. Most of the time they say, okay, I think these are the factors that represent a high conversion rate, so I'm gonna score my leads with those factors. It's arbitrary, and you're leaving leads that are probably great for the sales team on the table. A lot of people allocate resources in their marketing program arbitrarily. They'll just zero in on social media when they really need to be focusing more on just creating content. They get paralyzed by the complexity of marketing automation and all of these processes before they're ready to really build a foundation. And one of the worst problems that we see is just addiction to the crack of bought lists. So bought lists expire at more than 20% a year. And so if you're continuing to buy lists and your lists just keep expiring, you're just going to have to keep buying more and more lists. And it's not a process. It's not a way of building a strong marketing process. So as a marketer, what you really need to do is focus more on cooking great food. And in the marketing context, what that means is thinking about how all of this data, all of these 21,000 activities a week, have an impact on your funnel. So what I want to do is walk through sort of 5 steps that I think most marketers should think about when they're thinking about data and building this data-driven marketing process. The first 2 are kind of setup steps, things you need to get started with. And the rest are, the other 3 are sort of scenarios that you may find yourself, and I'll walk through those one by one. So the first thing is you have to make sure you're collecting the right data. So many people are just focused on visits or focused on one specific metric. You need to be tracking your full funnel. And so when we say your full funnel, what we mean is beginning with your visitors and looking at your leads and their conversion rates to visitors, looking at your lead to customer conversion rate, and then your customers and your revenue. The good news, as most of you HubSpot customers know, is that that's easy to track. HubSpot makes that very easy to track. You can see you have a nice little pull down right there. It's very nice. So this is something you obviously need to do just to get started. The second thing is you have to set goals. You're not going to build this kind of process if you don't have the right goals in place. And so what I mean by that is you're recording this data, you're looking at your data from the last year, and you want to figure out what you want to do in the next year. So say your company sets a sales goal of $10 million. You make some assumptions, assume that your conversion rates stay the same. And for a marketer, you're up to 25 million visits that you need to get in order to reach your sales goal for the year. It's amazing how many marketers just don't know what these goals are. You can't worry about building a data-driven marketing process, building an analytical marketing process until you have some basic goals. And again, this is pretty easy to set up in HubSpot these days. You see this little, all of you guys, how many of you guys are familiar with this picture here? Awesome, so you have the custom goal up here that you can set if you want. And here you see that we've set up the custom goal, and then that the background here is the goal, and the front, the color on the front is what you're actually tracking towards. So collect your data, set up goals. Now, the three scenarios are sort of where this gets a little more interesting, I think. There are a couple different situations here. But the first is when you have very low traffic. So this person is getting insane conversion rates from lead to customer. And their visitor to lead conversion rates aren't that bad either. So if they just bump up the traffic coming in the top of their funnel, they could really move this bottom line. So at HubSpot, what we typically tell marketers is that to move that top line, to move your traffic number, what you need to do is blog more, do your SEO, do more SEO, build a base on social media, and do more social media. So that's sort of the core of generating more traffic from your funnel. Now, what we don't talk about as much, but I think is just as important, is that there's an analytical layer on top of all of this. That in order to really accelerate your traffic in the top of the funnel, you need to look at how it's performing and make analytical decisions on your content. And so an example of how you can do that in HubSpot is keywords. So this is Keyword Grader, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with. And when I look at this, what I find most interesting is this number over here, the rank. And so we're well below that top of the page that Rand was talking about today. He was sort of talking about the top 5, which is sort of any of those top 5 might be the one that is clicked. These are below that. They're sort of below the fold, but they're within striking distance. So as a HubSpot blogger or content creator, when I look at this, I'm thinking, OK, this is something I need to write about. This is something I need to write about. And these are some things I need to write about. Because if I can get an article that helps bump up those numbers, we're going to have a disproportionate return on traffic. We're going to get more traffic than we would if we just picked a keyword out of thin air. So by using these tools, by thinking about the impact of the traffic and your keywords, you can have a much bigger impact on your traffic coming in the top of the funnel. There are a bunch of HubSpot tools where you can do this. So this one is page performance. And what I'm looking at here are really the links, because I want to see the links coming into specific pages on my website and specific pieces of content. And as a blogger, I want to say, OK, what are the articles that are generating links? And then I want to go back to square one and say, OK, how can I create more like that? Same thing for conversion assists. This is a new tool in HubSpot over the last year. And what I'm looking at here are the leads. So how many leads viewed this page? This article up here, this is the one that I think is most interesting to me, because that's one that's converted the most leads. I want to go create more content like that so that I can create, to generate more leads. The last thing that I want to point out, the last sort of view that you can use to drive improvement in your content is the social media. And so you can see I'm looking over here at clicks, and I'm just looking at what people are engaging with. OK, so that's the top of the funnel. The next problem that you run into is a low conversion rate in the middle of the funnel. So you got your top of the funnel figured out. This person's generating 2 million visitors a year, and now they need to work on converting all of those visitors over to leads. So the way to solve this problem in HubSpot is to focus on A/B testing. And so You can A/B test your landing pages. You can A/B test your calls to action. Hopefully, in the not too distant future, you'll be able to do a lot more with all of these tools. Stay tuned for the big keynote tomorrow morning. But here's an example of how you do that. This is an example of an A/B test I'm doing on the site I was talking about, or that was at the beginning. This is a test between submit an order or purchase beef. I haven't started the test yet. But it's an example of just of what you can do with just testing these calls to action. So you need to build this kind of process, this kind of testing into your routine. And there are a lot of questions that come up when you do this. So one is, how many variants should you run? What we typically say is, think a bit about it like a playoff bracket. You want to set a number 1 seed against a number 16 seed, and run them against each other and run them against each other. I mean, when I say a number 1 seed and number 16 seed, what I'm talking about is 2 variants that are very different, and then pick the winner and find another one that's very different, and then pick the winner and keep going. Obviously, you don't want to, you'll have, you can do this forever, and you might want to stop at some point. I think the place to stop is really where when you run out of alternatives. When you sort of exhaust a range of differences. So the last sort of stage of the funnel here is the bottom of the funnel. It's where you've generated a whole lot more traffic in the top of the funnel. Your conversion rate has bumped up a lot, but you're still not selling. You're still not converting many of those leads to customers. And so this is where it actually gets very interesting because you have more data. So before you're looking at mostly anonymous data, and now you're actually beginning to build relationships with people. And this is where you, as a marketer, you can do much more interesting things. And so the place to start here is really to change your mindset so that you're trying to just personalize everything. If you think about your leads, your customers, they want to know your name. It sort of goes back to the Cheers refrain. And the place to start is with personalization of as much as you can. And so, a good example of that is personalizing your emails. So in HubSpot, you're collecting a lot of information in your forms. In HubSpot's new email tool, it's very easy to take that information and plop it right into your emails. And there's no reason not to do this because it's simple. And the way you do it over here, you can just see this. You click this little button right here, and you get all of the fields that you've added to your form. And you have the ability to just drop them right into your email. This kind of personalization is fantastic because I know as a consumer of emails, when you receive an email and there is personally identifying information in it, or information that makes it more relevant, that is personal to you, it sort of goes through it passes a level of in your consciousness because all of a sudden it's more relevant to you. You stand up straight and you pay more attention to it. So you want to start doing this a lot. The question is, what do you personalize? Well, we found at HubSpot that just personalizing the from name in the email makes a lot of sense. We've seen a significant improvement from our own emails in the from name, and we're doing a lot of other things. We're personalizing our sales rep's name, the business name, so that you can create a better interaction with your leads, trial dates in our trial. So there are a lot of different things that you can personalize. So that's sort of the first piece, the first thing that you can do at the bottom of the funnel. The second thing I think is what's most exciting to me. I mean, if you think about all of these activities on your site, these 21,000 activities every week, your site is covered with footprints of your potential customers. And what you want to do is use those footprints to engage with them, to create content that's more relevant. And it's very easy to do that. So the way you do it today in HubSpot is that you segment your leads. So you use these footprints to put them into buckets. And if we go back to the Target example, that's exactly what Target was doing. They're putting this woman into a bucket and sharing content that was relevant to her, offers that were relevant to her, because they knew that she was they knew that she was pregnant. So how do you do this? In HubSpot now, you can create lists. So this is the list creation screen in the new HubSpot list management tool. You can create lists using the criteria up here, and you end up with a big segment of contacts. Now this is the segment. And once you get that segment, you want to share content with them. So the way I think about it is just the way the New York Times is sharing content with me here. They're surfacing relevant content. And the goal is to share the right content with the right people at the right time. And so the way you do that, so you've created this list, and now you have this whole list of your contacts who fall into a specific bucket, and now you want to share content with them. And so the way that you do that is that you use this, which is the HubSpot Workflows tool. And so what you do here is that you can use an action at the top. So it says begin this workflow when any of the following conditions occur. And this is an action like here, it's a form submission. It may be something that happened on some other application that was delivered into HubSpot by a webhook. It may be a form submission or anything else. And then you trigger a series of steps, which are steps that add context to that person's experience. So it may be an email. You can see that there it says send email here. It may be setting a property value. It may mean sending the lead to Salesforce. There are any number of steps that you can take, and all of them should be designed to improve the context for that lead, to make the experience more personal and to build your relationship with that lead. So how are we using this at HubSpot? How does this actually materialize? There are a whole bunch of different ways that we're thinking about it. One of the things that we do is that when somebody visits our pricing page, we put them into a workflow. So somebody visits a pricing page, and then they get put into a specific segment. And that segment has content that's more relevant to those users because we know that they've seen the pricing page. And the result is that the conversion rate is better. Same for a free trial. So if you're doing specific things in the free trial, we know more about you. You aren't just an anonymous user on our website. You're doing specific things, setting up specific apps, so we can share a specific ebook with you. When you come back to our site, we can share specific content with you. The whole idea here is creating a more personalized experience for these prospects. So I want to step back here for a second and sort of review what we've been through. These sort of 5 fundamental pieces of setting up a data-driven marketing process. You have just the top of the funnel, which is measuring your funnel, setting up some measurable goals, using data for the top of the funnel to get found to improve the performance of your content, using data to improve your conversions through the middle of the funnel, and using data to generate customers, to convert your leads to customers. Now, I'm sure there are a bunch of you guys who are saying, okay, well, what about big data? This is small data. This is like stuff that is pretty basic and sort of core to HubSpot, that we've seen before in HubSpot. So yes, this is not what Target is doing, but it is the foundation. And you can't get there without putting this process in place. And so if you want to start doing that sort of complex that complex marketing, you need to start with this core set of marketing practices in your funnel. you need to start with a foundation. So I want to close with just one thought to wrap it up. So I've sort of laid out a big data marketing cookbook for HubSpot users. And it's clear how you can lean on HubSpot to generate more visits, leads, and revenue through your funnel. And I think that's great because it delivers you more ROI. It's a better process. It's more measurable. But the thing that I like most about it, I think the thing that is most attractive about this approach to marketing is that it's just a better approach to marketing. The traditional approach is kind of like this. You feel like your 4th grade teacher is wagging her finger at you for throwing spitballs in the back of the room because what you're doing is spamming people. And what we're talking about here, putting in place this process of gathering data about people and then sharing content that's relevant to them is much more effective. Because you make people happy, and they engage with you more, and they're more likely to convert, and then you just feel better about it. So I think I'm very excited about this. I hope you guys are too. I think we probably have a little time for questions if anybody has them. Yes?
So what's one way that you would go to that next phase? Like, what's a good first step after you do all this to actually append the HubSpot data with other either offline or other online data that wasn't captured initially by HubSpot to get towards that bigger total data? What's one step? Maybe something that's in the HubSpot ecosystem that is an integration with this. One way that you would do.
So the short answer is pulling data in from other places. So maybe it's from Zendesk or something like that. Maybe it's from some sort of SMS program. But the way the HubSpot contacts database is set up, the way this whole process that I just outlined is set up, makes it very easy to pull data in. And so the more data that you pull in, the more you know about these people, the more you can customize the experience, the more you can share Pinterest ebooks with the right people. Yeah, developers.hubspot.com. Developers.hubspot.com is a fantastic resource. Other questions? Nope? Okay. Thank you, guys.